We continue now at the top of Daf Samech B in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 69b. On the previous Amud, Rami Bar Chama asked, what if an elephant, it swallows the fibers that are used to make a basket, and then those come out the other end? And the Gemara now is continuing and clarifying the question. So then if using those fibers one makes a basket, a kfifa mitzris, kechlei gelolim kechlei adama, is that considered like vessels made out of dung or vessels made out of earth? Ve'ein mekabel tuma, and those kind of vessels are not mekabel tuma. Diyamar mar, as the master said, klei avonim uchlei gelolim uchlei adama, if you have vessels made of stones or vessels made of dung or vessels made of earth, ein mekabel tuma, those are not mekabel tuma. They do not become tamei, lo midivrei Torah, v'lo midivrei sofrim, they don't become tamei on a doraisa level, and they don't become tamei on a derabanan level. O dilma, or maybe lo haveichol, maybe it's not considered to be like it's digested, it comes out whole, those fibers come out whole on the other end, and so therefore a vessel made out of that would in fact be mekabel tuma. That's the question of Rami Bar Chama. And the Gemara continues, Tifshut le mehadam ar Ula mishum Rabbi Shimon bar Yehotzadok. We can answer this question from the statement of Ula in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yehotzadok. Maisa ubolu ze'evim shnei tinokos be'ever hayardin. There was an incident, and wolves swallowed two babies on the other side of the Yarden. Uva maisa lefnei chachamim, and this incident came before the chachamim. V'tiaru es habasar, and they said that the basar, it's not considered to be tamei anymore. It's considered that it went through the digestive process, and so the same thing should be true over here. It's no longer considered to be like these fibers, rather it's considered to be kechlei gelalim. But the Gemara says, no, shani basar, it's different by meat. The rochich, that's soft, and so therefore we understand that that's considered to be digested. That would not necessarily be true by these fibers that come from a tree. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'lifshot mi seifa, but we could still answer the question from the end of that statement above, because it says, by that situation of the wolves, v'timu es ha'atzamos, it says that the bones, they in fact were tamei, and the bones are a harder substance that should be similar to the fibers, and therefore just like the atzamos, they remain atzamos, so too the fibers should remain fibers. But the Gemara says, no, again, shani atzamos, it's different by bones, da kushe tvei, those are even harder. Essentially over here, when we're talking about the fibers that are used to make this kfifa mitzris, to make this basket, those are basically in between atzamos and basar, and that's why there's a question in this particular case. And Rashi explains, klei glolim again means klei gloli behema, that's vessels that are made from the dung of animals. Ubalu shnei ze'evim shnei tinokos, and two wolves, they swallowed two babies, v'ikiyum derech beisarei, and they came out the other end. V'tiaru es habasar, and again they said the meat is considered tahor. Al mahaviyichol, so we see again that's considered to be digested. And again the Gemara said that the question is specifically by these fibers, which are in between basar and atzamos. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera asks the following question, Chitin sheyardu ba'avim mahu, let's say wheat comes down from the clouds, what's the halacha in that situation? And Rashi explains, sheyardu ba'avim, they come down from the clouds, im hamater, means the wheat comes down together with the rain. Kishashasu avim bu'kainos, Rashi understands what's happening is, when the clouds absorb water from the Atlantic, balu svina malei chitin, they also swallowed up a ship that was full of wheat, and that's how the wheat came down. And so again, the question of the Gemara is, the question of Rabbi Zera is, if these chitin come down, what's the halacha? And the Gemara again asks, Lamai, but for what practical issue are we asking? What are we asking about in terms of the halacha with regards to this wheat? The Gemara says, Ila Menachos, if we're talking about for a carbon mincha, can you use this wheat for a carbon mincha? So Amai lo, so why not? Why shouldn't you be able to use this wheat for a carbon mincha? And so the Gemara says, Ella, rather, the question is l'shtei halechem. It's specifically for the shtei halechem, can you use this wheat? Because by the shtei halechem, there's a requirement that it comes from Eretz Yisrael. And so what's the halacha? Mimosh voseichem amarachmona. It says mimosh voseichem, from your dwelling places. That's what the Torah says. Lafuke de chutzlar, it's the law that excludes if it comes from outside Eretz Yisrael. That kind of wheat you cannot use. Avol da'avim shaper dami, but if it comes from the clouds, it would be fine. Odilmor, maybe mimosh voseichem dafka means it has to be from your dwelling places. V'afilu da'avim namilo, and then if it comes from the clouds also, no, that would in fact be a problem. But the Gemara continues and asks, so mi'ika ki hagavna, but is there even a situation like this of wheat coming down from the sky, from the clouds? And the Gemara says, yes, kida adi taya, it's like Adi, the nomad, nechisale rum kizba chiti. It came down for him a kizba, that's the height of a kizba of wheat, bitzlasa parsi and 3 parsa, and so therefore we see that such a situation is in fact able to occur. And Rashi explains, Rum Kizba Betlasa Parsi, again it was the height of a Kizba in 3 Parsa, Shahaya Karko Orech Gimel Parsos. The point is that his land, that's how long it was. It was 3 Parsos. Rum Kizba is Tvachim Biskifas Godel. A Kizba is basically Tvachim, it's 2 Tvachim and you stretch out the thumb. That's just a measurement, and so again, such a scenario did in fact occur. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi asks the following question, Shibola shehivia shlish, if you have a stalk of grain that grew a third, kodem la'omer, before the omer, va'akra, and then it's uprooted, v'shasla la'achar omer, and it's put back into the ground after the omer, v'hosifa, and then it grows some more, so mahu, what's the halach over there? Basar ikar azlinan, do we follow the ikar, do we follow that main part that grew before the omer, v'sharya omer, and the omer already permitted it, odilmor, maybe, basar tosefes azlinan, we follow what was added on, what grew, viad sheyavo omer haba, and then we have to wait until the coming omer. And Rashi explains, Shevia shlish, again it grew a third, lahachi nakat shlish, the reason why specifically a third, to chashav gemar pri, that's already considered like the fruit, like the produce is finished growing, di mekame hachi akar, now if it was uprooted before that, have a keshachas bialma, that would just be like shachas, it wouldn't be considered to be like real grain, velo mahani omer lemeshari, and then the omer would certainly not permit it, and again, vi'akra kodem laomer, it was uprooted before the omer, v'shas lo la'achar omer v'osifa, and then it was planted after the omer, and then it grew, mashu a little bit more, mahu, what's going to be the halacha in that situation? In this particular situation, again, it was uprooted before the omer, and then it was planted after the omer, so what is the halacha? And the Gemara continues and says, Tifshot le mehad amar Rabbi Avo amar Rabbi Yochanan, we should answer this question from the statement of Rabbi Avo, that Rabbi Avo said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, Yalda shesivcha bizikeina, let's say you have a young tree, and then you graft it onto an older tree, uva peros, and there are fruits on it, afilu hosif masayim, even if it adds on by 200, it grows by a multiple of 200 aser, it is going to be aser, it is going to be forbidden. And Rashi explains, Yalda shesivcha bizikeina, netiya shel arla, the case over here is, let's say you have a plant, let's say you have a tree, and it's arla, it's already still within the first 3 years, uva peros, and there are fruits that should be forbidden as arla, kiva bizikeina, and then it's grafted onto an older tree, sha'avru lo yemer arla, so that's already an older tree, there is no arla for that tree, afilu hosifu haperos ba'ovi, la'achar shesivcha b'masayim shel heter yoser mishayasham min ha'isr, even if it grew to the amount 200 times the amount now of heter than what was there that when it was aser it is still forbidden. V'afal gav da arla batla b'masayim, even though, generally speaking, arla is nullified when you have 200 times the amount. In other words, in this situation, you had fruits of arla, and now is grafted onto an older tree, and now what grew really is growing at the time that it's grafted onto this older tree was already 200 times the amount. It should have been mevatel the arla, but here we're going to say that it's still aser. Kidamar b'psachim, like we say in psachim, se'echad min hamasayim mimoser shtei moshe neshtayru bebor mikan la'arla shebatla b'masayim. That's what we say in psachim, that arla is generally nullified in 200 times the amount. Afilu achi, nevertheless, hacha aser, here it is aser. Dechad gufu, because it's all considered one. Uvaser ikra azlinan, we follow the ikra, we follow the main source, and therefore the main source over here is this younger tree that was in fact arla. So even though those fruits have grown, but still basar ikr, we do follow the main source, and therefore we say that it is aser, and therefore the same thing should be true in this case as well. In this case as well, it was hevia shlish, and then it was planted after the omer, and then hosifa, it was added on, but basar ikr azlinan, we're going to follow the main source, and in this particular case, it's actually going to be mutter. The main source is something that the omer was matir, so the fact that this grew after the omer is not going to make a difference. In other words, the Gemara is trying to say, just like over there we follow the ikr and we are strict, so too over here with regards to this question of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, we would follow the ikr and we will be lenient. And the Gemara continues, V'yomer Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Yomer Rabbi Yonasan. We also have a statement from Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, that Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says that Rabbi Yonasan says, Botzel, with regards to an onion, Sheshaslu bekerem, that it was planted in a vineyard, it's an issue of kilayim, V'nekar hakerem, and then the kerem, the vineyard is uprooted. Afilu hosip masayim, even if it grows by 200 times the amount, aser, it is going to be forbidden. And Rashi explains this case, Botzel shashaslo bekerem, v'nekar hakerem afilu hosef la'achar ikar hakerem, even if after the kerem is uprooted, hagodol beheter b'masayim. So now at this point in time, the onion was in an issue of kilayim, but now the kerem has been uprooted, the vine has been uprooted, and now the onion continues to grow. What grows should really not be kilayim, and let's say it grows by 200 times the amount, b'masayim chalakim yoser, mishahayu bo b'isr. It's 200 times larger than what it was when it was aser, but again, that main source is something that was aser. So again, afilu hosef b'masayim aser, even if it added on by 200, it is still aser. Again, we follow the ikr, we follow the main source. And so therefore, again, we should be lenient in the question of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. But the Gemara continues and says, Hi gufa kami boileno, but that's exactly what the question of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi was. Mivshad pshita luhu l'rabbanan debaser ikr as linan. Is it that it's obvious to the rabbanan, to the sages, that we follow the main source, and loshna lakula v'loshna lachumra? It doesn't matter if it's a leniency or a stringency, in which case, yes, we can answer the question of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi lakula. O dilmar, maybe safuke mesafka lahu, maybe it's really just a doubt to the rabbanan. They don't know whether we follow the ikr or not. Ulachumra amrinan, and therefore these two examples that we just brought, yalda shesivcha bizikena, and then we have the case also of the botzel shashaslu bekerem, that's lachumra amrinan. We're just being strict and we're following the ikr. But lakula lo amrinan, but we wouldn't necessarily say that and be lenient as in the case of the question of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. And the Gemara says teku, the Gemara leaves that as a question. And Rashi explains, loshna lakula kagon shibolas. The leniency would be like our case of the stalk of grain. Diazlinan bei basar ikr. If we're going to follow the ikr over there, what grew before the omer, have a kula, then it's a leniency. To lo boy lahamtanat omer haba, then we don't need to wait until the next omer. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabba asks the following question, Le'inyan Meiser Mai. What about as far as Meiser is concerned? And the Gemara continues and says, Hey Chidami, what exactly is the case? Kegon, for example, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph.